The Silver Screen Project.
Welcome to the Silver Screen Project, where we look back at a series of films in anticipation of an exciting new cinema release.
In preparation for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, we covered Raiders of the Lost Ark, we covered Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, we covered Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and now we're covering everyone's favourite, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
The only one of the four that I saw in cinema because the others came out before I was born.
Same for me, yeah.
And I remember this cinema experience.
I do.
As
I
well.
remember it as well. I definitely feel somewhat differently about it now. I feel like at the time I was a little bit underwhelmed by it, to be honest.
It was 2008, so I would have been like 14
Yeah.
and well into Indiana Jones by that
Right,
point.
yes, yeah.
So I was very, very excited for this. And whilst I think I enjoyed it on the face of it, it was kind of like it wasn't quite as good as I hoped.
Yeah.
I've watched it 2 or 3 times since, including for this.
Yeah.
And I have kind of warmed to it a bit.
Yeah.
I think you kind of get past the obvious criticism and you're like, actually, there's still some fun stuff in this.
Yeah, I think the first thing I noted was that it's funny how at the time we thought this was the old man Indiana Jones. And obviously now, however long later, there's a new one where he's, 13 years older or whatever it is. 15 years older.
So this is... Well, this was set in like 1952, I think.
Yeah.
The new one is set in 1969, so he's like a significantly older Indy, a 15-year-older Harrison Ford.
Well, exactly, and I think he doesn't look that old in most of this, to be honest, compared to I haven't seen the new one, but I don't think I've really seen the trailers either. But seeing him in interviews and stuff over the last few years, seeing him in the new Star Wars films, he looks significantly older than he does in this film. But yeah, I feel like overall it hits a lot of the same moments and the same kind of routines. What do you call it? The formula of the original ones, bar Temple of Doom there. And I feel like most of that feels pretty genuine. It doesn't feel like a kind of nostalgia bait thing. Maybe some people would disagree with that, because it is kind of like, here's this bit, here's this bit.
But like, I mean, we spoke about Last Crusade and that does the same things, but that's widely beloved, even though it's still that formula.
And a lot of that, like the formula in general for this is pretty much the same as number 1 and number 3 in most ways there.
I think obviously one thing that was the big talk at the time and some people were upset with was the fact that it's aliens.
Yeah.
And at the time I was kind of like, well, aliens, that's weird. But once you kind of had time to think about it, like all these films are a little bit supernatural and weird. And having watched it again the other day, I was like, I actually really like the idea that like the ancient Incans worshipped these alien visitors. I was like, that works quite well.
Yeah, and like, they hand wave it enough with their extra dimensional beings, and it's drip fed to you enough throughout the film that by the time it's revealed, even like halfway through, you see like the alien corpse, and you're like, okay, so we're pretty sure it's an alien. And then by the end, you actually see like a full blown alien, like giving a little wink to Kate Blanchett or whatever happens there at the end. But yeah, like it works for the era that it's set in because it's post Roswell, and we see hints to that, and they talk about that.
I think
it's the popular thing of that period.
Exactly. So like number 1 and 3 are set in the late 30s. So they're fighting Nazis. It makes sense. Yeah. And the second one is kind of a looser time. It doesn't really matter the time. It's in the 20s, but it's set in kind of British India. But this, it's the 50s. It's Roswell. It's when aliens were a popular thing. So it makes sense to do aliens.
Yeah, even to the point of having like a very traditional looking flying saucer at the very end. Like it just, I think a lot of people, including I think even myself, seeing that for the first time in the cinema is like, oh, and they're actually even doing a UFO. It's a bit like, but I think that sequence especially is really cool. Yeah. I know we're skipping literally almost to the very end, but just there's a really nice quiet moment where everything starts spinning and it's just the music builds and it's basically just like Indy just standing on the edge of this thing. It's almost unclear if anyone else sees it as well because they're a little bit further down. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they see something, but he just watches the whole thing just take itself apart. Yeah. I really like that bit. I thought it was really cool.
I think it's just quite Cool. Yeah, and what we mentioned one thing that I just love the thing where it's like, oh, here's this thing, we've got a clue, and we set off on our adventure. It just immediately just grabs you, and you're like, yeah, I'm ready for this.
Yeah,
I think in this one as well, because this came out 19 years after we mentioned Harrison Ford older.
Yeah,
I like that the film is like, yeah, I'm older. I'm an old man now, and like I can't do all the stuff that I did before, but I'm still going out and punching people. Like it acknowledges his age, and it doesn't just hide behind like, oh no, he's really great still. He's still the same guy. It's like, no, he is older, and that's cool.
Yeah, and I think even from the very start, like overall, they nailed the kind of aesthetic of it. It feels like it's in the 50s. Like from the opening, you see like the hot rod car, and there's like you see some greasers later on, and there's like
I really enjoy the bit where he's chatting with Shia LaBeouf, and they go off, and he just starts the fight between like the jocks and the greasers, and it's just like, it's a fun little scene that it's very 50s.
And I feel like even the kind of visuals of it, there are some spotty bits kind of in the middle, and there's a particular sequence that most people have some sort of problem with. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think overall they've got this kind of nice kind of glowy kind of old-fashioned look to everything. It doesn't most of the time look too kind of digital and CG. There are obviously moments, but generally they capture the kind of feel where it could have been made around that time and it wouldn't have looked too different.
It kind of looks like that really brightly like pale coloured 50s aesthetic, and it just kind of works. I like as well, this is the first indie film set after the war,
right?
And it doesn't hide away from the fact that I think they call him Colonel Jones at some point.
And there's quite a lot of conversations, especially early on, about he did a lot of work for the was it called the US? What's it? The USS? What's the special forces that were like, OSS, the OSS, yeah. And him and the other guy Mac, they obviously work together, and there's the spies for the allies, and all
it just kind of makes sense, and it adds a bit to his history because he would have been at the right age. So you can't really just overlook it.
And if he's done enough stuff that's transected with the military in his 3 adventures, it's like they would definitely call on him to do some spy stuff. It is almost a shame, and maybe we will at some point, but it's a shame that we don't see more of that kind of period of his life. And I imagine when it gets to the point where he doesn't want to do it at all, they can just do a digital version of him completely.
Yeah, maybe. I won't say anything about the new film. There may be...
I mean, I've heard bits and pieces about that.
We get again, which I always like to point out, we get another him traveling with the map, which is like, considering this was made 20 years later, they could have just ignored that, but they're like, no, this is an Indiana Jones staple. We need to have a bit where him traveling with a map in the background and a red line, which is just fun. We get the return of Marion, which is great, and she's fun. The fact that she turns out to be Shia LaBeouf's mom is a great little twist, and she's there, and you're like, oh yeah,
I really
she's
like
fun.
how what's he called, Ox, John Hurt, who is great as well. He doesn't get to do masses because he's in his kind of weird trance the whole time.
But John Hurt's fun.
I really like when he comes back to his senses and he finds out that Shia LaBeouf is his son, and he's like, what? Because he's been like looking after him his whole life.
He's been like his teacher and stuff.
It almost seems like a kind of surrogate, like granddad in a way. Yeah, very fun.
John Hurt. I like the fact that there's a really like common line for Indiana Jones to always turn to people and be like, trust me. He doesn't do that in this, but he does say, I've got a bad feeling about this. And I was like, they've got to have an iconic Harrison Ford line in there somewhere. They've gone like, no, let's do the Star Wars one instead.
We one of the earliest bits, so we get the Area 51 bit, which is very fun. I think that's it kind of references the Ark of the Covenant, which is a fun little like, hey, here's a little Easter egg thing there. There's just it's a fun little bit with the magnets. I think that's like almost like a puzzle solving temple kind of situation, but in like the real world kind of thing. I quite like that. And he's jumping across and everything. It gets a little bit silly when he's kind of swinging on stuff, but it's always a bit silly like that. But what I was going to say is when we get a teaching bit with Indy, which is fun. He's a bit older. He's just kind of getting on with it. But then Jim Broadbent has effectively replaced Marcus as like. I
forgot Jim Broadbent was in this.
We get a little Marcus painting on the wall as they go down the corridor, which is cute. And I like that he just gets fired from his job because like they're worried. It's like the Red Scare situation, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's had his little run-in with the FBI and they're like, mate, no.
I like the fact as well that Indy's like, oh, you should have fought more for me. And Jim Boardman's I resigned. And then they go off and
they have their little bit of...
set the scene for the rest of the film.
And I think the really funny bit based on that as well is that the next time most of the students see him, he's now riding around on a motorbike through the library. It's like he's really gone off the deep end after he got fired.
I love it where he kind of scoots in, falls off, and there's just a student who's like, Can I have help with this paper?
And he's like, you shouldn't be reading this one, read this one. And he says, like, you need to get out of the library and do some field work.
I haven't got too many more positives, although I don't know where I fall on Shia LaBeouf. Like, I think the character's not great, but on rewatching, I'm like, actually, it's quite an interesting parallel to like The Last Crusade, where he's kind of the young troublemaker compared to the older, more sensible father figure.
I think most of it I don't think he's the most likable character. He's kind of useless, and then suddenly all of his strengths, the sword fighting they mentioned once becomes his superpower.
Yeah.
There's lots of silly stuff we can talk about in a moment. But I think overall, there is a kind of arc for him. And there's a point towards the end when they fall down the temple into the spikes are all really far apart. They're worried about falling on.
Yeah.
That's a bit silly. But
and they fall like 5 foot.
Yeah. And he just takes the lead and he's like, where are we going? And there's a moment where he looks at him, he's like, that's my son. It's like, it's nice.
And later when he calls him Junior, and it's like,
yeah. I think there's some good action bits. There's the greaser bit. There's the chase after that with the KGB guys. That's all fun. There's a moment, although I don't love the little tribe people like running around like that's a bit maybe a bit dated. But there's a great bit after Indy does his first kind of punching bits there where Mutt's like, you're a teacher? And he's like, part-time.
Yeah.
Very good. And that whole jungle chase thing, I imagine that's something that you're going to want to talk about in the negatives. So I'll save it for them. But I think there's some positives in that. We'll talk about it in a sec. I like they keep all the kind of classic big punching sounds when someone gets hit. It's very kind of retro. And there's not masses of like puzzles in this, but there's some fun bits with the sand doing a little mechanism and stuff like that. It's like it's something. Again, it kind of does the thing where John Hurt's already kind of solved them all, which is kind of not the best indie thing.
Not as interesting, but it worked for The Last Crusade, so you can't hold it too negatively.
And there is a moment where they mention Oppenheimer, which ties into our Manhattan Project that we've been doing.
It does.
I was like, hey! Robert. But I mean, Cate Blanchett's all right, isn't she?
No, she's bad.
Yeah.
It's the accent is just
it's all
so
over the place.
off-putting.
Yeah, I think I can kind of see what they were trying to do because the idea of doing the Soviets instead of the Nazis, it works for the era.
And I think I read that like apparently Stalin was like interested in crystal skulls and stuff. So okay, let's make the Soviets the villains.
Right, it makes sense. But she's just like she's almost so exaggerated. The fact that she's got this like bob haircut, which I don't think is a particularly popular style for Soviet people at the time, and the fact she's got this sword and these boots, like it's almost too silly.
It's kind of like in the previous films, you did often have like an over the top silly character. Like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Nazi guy who burns his hand and melts in the air is a silly.
He's almost
Nazi.
like a full caricature with the little mole glasses and everything.
But it's always like a secondary villain who's that, whereas she is the main villain.
And her main guy is just like a guy who kind of looks like Putin a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost it should be the other way around. And she should be the odd job or the Jaws or whatever of the kind of thing. I totally
or
get
even
that,
like Elsa in The Last Crusade, play that kind of role but without having to turn.
I think it's just it's a little bit silly, and the fact that she seems to believe that she is telepathic even from the very start, because there's a couple of moments where she's almost trying to do some brain stuff before like telepathy is a real thing in this I don't know. It's a little bit silly.
I did read that during filming, and they'd been filming a couple of weeks, and Harrison Ford turned to one of the people that worked there and was like, who's this blonde woman that keeps walking around the set? Because Cate Blanchett would put on her wig to act, and he just gets to see this blonde woman walking around, and he's like, and they're like, it's Cate Blanchett, the main villain of this film. He's like, oh, okay. Another character who does kind of play that secondary villain in a way is Ray Winston, I think for most of it is quite fun. I didn't like the fact that like he was an ally and then he turned and he's a bad guy, but then he's good again, but then he turns again.
Yeah, because they do the same thing where he's getting all the treasure, and it's the same thing that we spoke about last time with Elsa, where he gets the chance to not be greedy, but he doesn't. He almost tries to take his hand, but it's like the whole whip, and he gets sucked away. Yeah, that falls apart a little bit because it's fun that he's dropping the little trackers, and it's like, oh, he's actually a triple agent.
Yeah,
but then he's a quadruple agent because he tries to. Yeah,
it kind of makes Indy look like a bit of an idiot for believing him twice. Yeah, like that he was on his side.
I think just doing the double agent would have been, or the triple agent would have been good enough, because if he'd come back and helped them and not led them to the temple at the end and they just followed him.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe he was still greedy and he still tried to do that, but he wasn't actively working with the Soviets. That kind of, it makes Indy just look like a bit of a stupid old man.
Yeah.
Really. But yeah, he's quite fun. Like, he's kind of like sneering and he's like, oh, he's all about the money and everything. He's a fun little kind of Weasley guy, isn't he? Yeah.
Going into the more negative, one obvious one that everyone said at the time, there's no way Indiana Jones survives being in that fridge.
Well, I had a little look about this online, and the one of the popular theories is that the residual Holy Grail juice was still in him, and that's why he survived.
But isn't the whole point that
it doesn't pass out of there?
Yeah,
but maybe it was a little bit.
It's like they make a point that it's like lead lines. It's like, okay, so you won't get radioactive, but it gets shot miles and bounces around. It's like
it's a bit silly. Yeah,
I feel like as well. Something we mentioned in all three of the previous ones is how fun and iconic the opening scene was, like with the barrel run, James Bond in China, and then the kind of the young indie Wild West. I feel like this one's intro is just a bit meh.
Yeah, I feel like it gets a little bit silly when he's kind of jumping along the crates and stuff, but I feel like up until that point, I feel like it's a pretty good introduction of him again. They do the silhouette reveal, which is very much from the first film.
I think like with the first three, it's usually like a fun little action set piece that ends, and then we go into the story, whereas this is like the story starting straight away without an action bit.
I guess they were probably thinking that if he's done another adventure right before, then he's not getting pulled into a new adventure after being retired. So that was probably the thinking. But yeah, I see what you mean, because it doesn't fully work there. Yeah, I mentioned the kind of Kung Fu Peruvians. I feel like it's very much that era, like not Kong Skull Island, Peter Jackson's King Kong has a similar thing where there's these like creepy over the top native people.
I read somewhere that apparently the whole martial arts stuff isn't actually that historically accurate, and like something. But like
almost like a capoeira.
It does just seem a bit weird.
Yeah,
and I was just kind of, and they run off into their little holes and then come out.
And there's the part where they're behind those kind of almost like the peaky portrait things. They break through them. Like, are they stuck in there until then? Like, it doesn't really. And they because they don't really provide any. They're not really important at all. It makes them feel even more like background characters, because when the Russians come in, they just shoot them all, which is like, that's what you would do.
Yeah.
And that kind of works for it. But it's the fact that, they almost seem maybe don't have anyone there and they're all gone kind of thing. It seems a bit unnecessary, really.
Yeah. One other thing that I wasn't sure about compared to how it was done previously. So like, the first one, you got the bit where they discover the Ark and it's all this big like, and then the Nazis trap them in there. In Last Crusade, you've got the bit where they discover like the night and in the petroleum place. I feel like the equivalent of this is when they find the crystal skull, and when they go through the conquistadors and they find it, it's quite cool. But then after that, it's just like 5 minutes of like exposition explaining it, and I was just kind of like, oh, it's just not very fun.
There's some weird pacing in there, because after that they get captured. There's the bit where Ray Winston drunkenly supposedly reveals that he was a double agent. I feel like that's bullshit, and he just let that slip there. And then there's the psychic thing, which is whatever. It's a bit of mysticism. It's whatever. And then they escape, and then they go in the quicksand only so that Marion and him can have the conversation about the sun, and then they get kidnapped again straight away. It seems like
they could have had that conversation when they were both captured and tied up to a pole.
I feel like the only good bit from that is when Mutt hands him the snake to get out, and he's like, "Tell me it's not a snake. Tell me it's a vine." It's like, It was a rope or whatever.
I felt sorry for that snake because that is being proper bored.
Yeah,
I did one funny bit in that where Mutt goes off and they say to Ox, John Hurt, like, go get help. And he runs back 5 minutes.
That's the thing, I'm like, don't tell this guy to get help because the only people near, he doesn't, Mutt's
who's he going to get?
It's fine. So the main bit we haven't talked about is the extended sequence where there's the jeeps and everything, and they're driving through this big road that just exists in a jungle for some reason.
Yeah, see, like, I quite like the bit with the ants. The ants are quite fun.
Yeah,
the chase goes on for a bit long with people jumping from car to car.
Yeah.
The monkeys aren't in it as long as I remembered. But
it's very short, actually.
Because I remember that quite clearly because they do look terrible.
They do, and it's even the fact that Mutt gets kind of clotheslined up on a vine. For some reason, the vine then pulls him up into the trees, which doesn't make any sense.
Nah.
And then he's like, okay, I'm going to copy these monkeys and swing. It's all just ridiculous and stupid. I would have rather than none of that was in it. But it doesn't really, this is kind of what I was saying, I don't think it really fully takes away from that whole sequence because I feel like there are negatives. Like, it looks fake, like it looks like it's on a green screen.
Yeah.
I think it's easily the worst looking bit of the whole thing. It just, the wind's not even blowing right on their hair and stuff. It just doesn't work. But other than that, like, it has the kind of like constantly shifting action sequence of things like the tank scene from the previous film.
Yeah.
It has this kind of thing when they're jumping between and stuff like that. There are sillier moments that feel like Pirates of the Caribbean, like the fencing and stuff. It's like, oh, we know what you're doing here. It's Pirates of the Caribbean, just came out last year or whatever. But like the kind of shifting dynamic and the moments of comedy and stuff, I think do kind of work in its favor.
Yeah, they work in elements, but I think it's just kind of dragged out a bit. It seems like they're driving for like miles.
Yeah, and the fact that it's supposed to be on either, I don't know if they're driving straight through jungle or if there's already paths there, or it's not clear. It feels a little bit like the worst parts of, like, I don't know, a Fast and Furious film where they're driving for like 20 minutes and it's like, how long is this runway? It's that kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah. If that was cut down and shorter, maybe have another chase scene separate to that earlier in the film.
Because we were talking about, like, in The Last Crusade, there's the boat scene, there's the bike scene, there's the horse and the tank scene. Like, there's lots of chases, but they're spread out. Whereas this kind of, like, they've just kind of got this for like an extended period of time.
Because I even like because it's like an amphibious car thing they've got, when they end up going over the 3 waterfalls, 3 times it falls or whatever. Yeah. That's all kind of fun. It's like, it's silly, but it works what it is. Even the ant stuff, like you say, it's silly, but it works with the whole vibe of it.
Yeah, it's just that chase is a bit too long.
It's just too long, isn't it? And it's a shame. I guess it shows off all the sword fighting bits, which is why they did it. But it's like, maybe don't make her a sword fighter.
Yeah.
I don't know. There.
Yeah. I don't really have anything.
No, I haven't got much else to say.
So I've got a couple bits of trivia. Which was, first one is, Harrison Ford kept himself in such good shape over the years that his costume measurements for this movie have not changed since Indiana Jones The Last Crusade.
Wow.
19 years later and he's still got the same dimensions. It's pretty impressive.
That's good, yeah.
He performed many of his own stunts because stunt technology had become safer since 1989 as well. So even though he's old, he can still do it. And he said he felt it improved his performance, being able to do them. And I was like,
you can tell I didn't notice any moments where I'm like, this is obviously a completely different guy, like a young guy with a face on or whatever,
The other one, I might do a little test for you.
Okay,
Indiana Jones has more monikers in this movie than any other movie.
Right.
So he's got like Indiana and Indy and Dr. Jones.
Yes.
Jones, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more as well that he's called.
Is Jonesy one of them?
Jonesy is one of them. So he's Indiana, Indy, Dr. Jones, Jonesy.
I think Ox calls him Henry Jr. a lot.
He calls him Henry Jones Jr.
Jones Jr. And does he call him Junior? He doesn't call him
No,
Junior.
He does call him Henry at one point.
He calls him Henry at one point. I don't know the other
There's
ones.
Colonel Jones. He's called.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
He's called Dad.
And
enough. Daddy-O.
Okay, Prior to him being revealed as the dad, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, they are all. It's funny. You got to the point where it's like you could hear any of them and know who you're talking about, apart from like the dad and Daddy-O.
It just reminded me of the final scene of the film where there's the wedding, which is quite cute. And there's the moment which is kind of teasing where it might have gone in the future with the hat being blown towards Mutt, and he goes to put it on, it gets taken away. It's like, I think that's pretty funny. Like, it kind of works.
Yeah.
I'm glad that he didn't put the hat on, because that would have been like, now you've got to do that after this kind of thing. It's nice it was open-ended. There's also like a bit where, like, I think it was in the last one as well, the hat just keeps getting magically returned to him now at this point. The ants like carry it up and then leave it there. It's like,
I did see that John Rhys Davies was asked to come back to be in that wedding scene. And he was kind of like, he said he thought it'd be a bit just like cheap to just do that wedding. Like, he's not been in the film at all.
Have a scene earlier with him as well.
So he didn't do it, which is a shame, but
what can you do?
What can you do? So the last thing to do is ask you whether or not this got you more or less hyped for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Prod yes or prod no?
Yeah, I was very surprised to come out of this with a prod yes. I thought I was going to hate this, and I genuinely enjoyed most of this. So yeah, it was a prod yes. Yeah.
I was a prod yes as well, partly because I was kind of like, they can do an older Indy and it still work. Like, the story elements work. Like, this may not be the best film, but it does show that you can show this character age and still do it. So you can then do an even older Indy,
India Jones,
and like him still be a fun story and stuff. So I was like, actually, this is kind of, if this film didn't exist and it was just like, oh, we've got this 34-year gap from Last Crusade to a new one, you might be a bit more like, oh, is this still gonna work? But I mean, this is like, oh no, the film might not be great, the story might be great, but I believe in Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones
and that's
to do
the thing,
this.
I think his performance is still, you can still tell he's the same character. Like, it works well. He carries a lot of this.
It's so clear that Harrison Ford fucking loves playing Indiana Jones way more than like Han Solo. He just genuinely enjoys this. Like, this is what he wants his legacy to be. So he always puts in like a top-notch performance.
Needs to do more of these than he's been in Star Wars films, and that'll be his legacy.
Well, it would be with Dial of Destiny, it would be 5. So I think that will tie with Star Wars, because he was in Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker.
Yes.
So it'll be 5 of each.
Just needs to do one more.
Maybe. But yes,
so that's for next week.
That'll be for next week when we've seen Dial of Destiny. For now, hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll come back when we've seen that with our views on the new film.
Yeah, if you like this, check out the Project, which is on the same podcast channel.
Please do. Bye.
Bye.